I'm Andrew Brister. On this particular project, my company performed the laser scanning and as-built documentation on this. And we also have Matthew Radcliffe. I want to just say what your responsibility was on this. We didn't rehearse.
I thought I was going to go there and speak, but now you're having to speak with me, so it's throwing everybody off. Matthew Radcliffe with Mass Architects. We served as AE1 on this project, oversight for the state of Oklahoma's direct control.
We also have Heather Gardner from Quad.
I'm Heather Gardner, and I'm pre-construction director, and I pursued this design build proposal with our team, and Gardner is our architect, and so my role has been all pre-construction, which has lasted the last year, and I'll speak a little bit more about that later.
And Jeremy Gardner.
Jeremy Gardner for Gardner Studio. We were the design lead under everybody else. Matt was our boss, Heather was our boss, so that's why I'm the lead.
And with that, we're going to go ahead and get started. Matthew, would you come and introduce the project?
So this project is the historic restoration and renovation of the Jim Thorpe Memorial Office Building. It is another appropriated project continuing the restoration and investment within the Capitol complex. This building was built in the 30s and is directly across the street from the state capitol. So with this legislation that appropriated the dollars, it was to be delivered in a design build method. Our firm was selected as the AE1. In our responsibilities, we assisted with authoring the request for qualifications and the request for proposals for the shortlisted design build teams to then participate. Part of that was making sure that we had all of the accurate documentation together that we could then hand off to the respondents and the shortlisted firms to be able to work from. The state does have a pretty good archive of historic drawings and renovations along the way. But as we all know, that doesn't mean it's every wall, every place. And in all of the series of documents that we had, the building itself was occupied, and some of the areas very secured. And so the idea of our staff kind of going into each room with tape measures and a laser tape was not one that we were really looking to embark upon. So that's where we kind of came with and discussed with Andrew and his team about doing a point cloud scan so that we would have a more accurate depiction of what the current state was as we were going through everything else from there.
We're going to kind of round robin this presentation a little bit, and then we'll get into a little bit of a panel discussion. But thank you very much, Matt. And I just want to kind of go through what we embarked on for this laser scanning component of the project. So this should be fairly familiar to most of us as a starting point for a lot of our renovations. It's basically blank plans, and sometimes it's gathered from the fire routes on the walls, and sometimes we have better drawings, like from what Matt had said. On this particular project, we didn't have much to go on, and it was very clear in making a walkthrough that we had a lot of work to do because not all of these spaces were fully accurate and well accounted for. We went through a large planning process on this. We ended up doing a hybrid method where we combined a whole bunch of different types of scanning and a whole bunch of different types of reality capture all together in one. And it started with the exterior here. And as you can, if you take a look at this on the left-hand side photo, we actually have located where we are going to place all of our instrumentation. That was a really big component of trying to make sure that we captured everything that was important to the project. And at this point in time, everything's important to the project because our task is to capture that 90%. And so we just went, we went we tried to go over and above what we could actually capture with just a regular tape measure. We went everywhere. So as you can see, we've got a very full coverage of the exterior using a terrestrial, and then we've also done some photogrammetry on the site. On the interior, the schedule was really super important to make sure that we weren't going to disturb people, make sure that the secure spaces could stay secure, and we could really get done with these projects, to get done with each one of these floors and departments as quickly as possible. So we ended up using mobile mapping for this, and every project, every floor that we did had a mobile mapping scan plan associated with it. So again, like I said, it's a hybrid approach where we took out our terrestrial laser scanner, very high density and high precision equipment, and then layered onto that all of the photogrammetry and mobile mapping. Independent of that, we also had to work with, again, this really strict schedule. So we could only be in the building at certain times, and then we had to very specifically map out which programs we were going to measure when. So we always had to have somebody with us while we were doing it. We actually had to shut down a couple of elevators because we were doing elevator pits as well. So we covered the entire building. The main piece of this is the skeleton. Just like any good skeleton, it's going to hold together the bones. It's going to hold together everything associated with the project. And in this case, our skeleton is actually control points. So we set control points across the building, through the stairs, outside, on the rooftop, so that we could validate and control our laser scans. And I can get into more detail of that if time allows. But we built the skeleton, and in this, it might be hard to see, but all these little red X's are the control points that we used to control and validate our space. They look a little bit like this, and I'll just point one out here. The validation came from the terrestrial laser scanner, which has very high density and is very highly detailed, very accurate. And you can see that we actually put multiple control points inside of the stairs because that's what we were linking together all the floors. If you've never seen mobile mapping data before, it's a very interesting looking data set. It has a number of components to it, the first of which being this yellow line. The yellow line is our trajectory. So different than terrestrial laser scanning where you have one position and move to the next, we actually have a trajectory that we can follow, and it can paint the 3D it can paint the 3D data as we walk. And then each one of these red dots is a singular photo. And I'll also point out that we do have additionally some control points that we have marked as well. So this is the first step in validating the data that we have captured and locating it and constraining it to that skeleton. We also did photogrammetry. We took 2,100 photos of the exterior of the building. It's a lot of photos. But what's nice about it is that we can generate that into a 3D model as well. So this, all these little white dots are photographs that were taken by our drone and then stitched together into the 3D point cloud that you see below. All of that is actually conforming, again, to those control points here that we can see from our aerial point of view. And this is what those would look like from up above. The exterior terrestrial was also coordinated with this set of control. We didn't have to do as much control because for the exterior, because the exterior terrestrial combined with the interior really set our control for us as we went. At the end of the day, we ended up with a full point cloud. This is a section of that point cloud, but it's a full point cloud of the exterior, and then going up from the basement to the first floor and everything else, it all maps out together. So it's a full and complete point cloud everywhere that we possibly could, including inside of the ceiling. And that was a big component of this because as we know from many of our design projects, we never know really during the RFP process where the project is going to lead. So really capturing, again, the 90% of the building was really important for us this time. And then we took that point cloud and we generated a Revit model. So the Revit model turned into a highly accurate Revit model, way more accuracy than what we had from the point cloud, or excuse me, what we had from the PDF files. It's a pretty simple process of mapping on our point cloud data with our Revit model, and we don't necessarily discard the old PDFs, but we do generate most of our drawings then from the point cloud data itself. And as you can see, we had a lot of information inside of this model. All of the above ceiling information that we could get. Not all ceilings are able to be accessed, but where we could, we added that information. The last thing that we did was we created a virtual tour, and this is an example of these 4 components all stashed into a single virtual tour. And we'll talk about that a little bit later and how the design team used it. But we have all of our mobile mapping data, our exterior terrestrial, our drone data, and all of our above ceiling in a single view, in a single file that the team was able to walk through multiple times and sort of avoid having to bother the tenants of the building. So that really wraps up those 3 deliverables. We gave the design team the point cloud itself to be able to do any measurements that they want over and again. We gave them the virtual tour, which allowed for that deep level of visualization, and then we also gave them the Revit model that allowed them to build their designs from. That was the scope that Matt had asked us to work towards. So with that, we just wanted to give you a quick update on where the project stands now, and Jeremy and Heather will do that, and then we'll jump into some questions.
Thanks, Andrew. As you can tell, this information to come into this project during the RFP process and to have access to this is incredible. The RFQ process was incredibly intense. Being that it's a design build project, I'm not sure how many people in the room have worked on design build. There's not a lot of opportunity for that in Oklahoma. If there are 2 things that I love most, though, it is a high amount of collaboration between the architect and the contractor, and then historic projects. So this one just kind of jumped out when it came through. Obviously, I'm sure many of you thought that we are very much the underdog in approaching a project such as this. We have a history of doing, private work. I reached out to 2 architects that definitely would have been well suited to do this project, both of which turned me down and competed against me. So I asked my husband, because I was home at night, like, no one will do this with me, will you? So just so you didn't think that I just randomly want to use him on everything, I just wanted to point that out ahead of time. But anyway, so we approached this project, and as a design builder, so we're responsible and we take the risk on for our architect, for our consultants. And so instead of the consultants falling underneath Gardner, they fell underneath me, which is new as it relates to managing that process. So it's very intensive. So we have a building science and historic expert out of the East Coast, CBM. We had Gardner Architect as our lead architect. We used Albine Engineering. We ended up with J&A as our civil, and then we had Laud as our landscape. Now, this project did not have any landscape in it, but you'll find that we were able to find ways to really connect this piece of infrastructure to the community around it, and find ways to blend that in a comprehensive way. But so then we got to the RFP process where we were given all of the information that Andrew just shared, which is incredible going into a historic project. So the sky was the limit and what we could propose. And we really took advantage of that. So let's talk.
Within $60 million.
Correct, within $60 million. So with that, now this project is not only overseen by OMES and Matt Radcliffe as our AE1, but it's also overseen by an oversight committee, which is 3 House reps, 3 senators and a few other members, a member of the Corporation Commission who is a tenant in this space. So lots of people with eyes on this project that we have to answer to quarterly. So this excerpt that we're going to share with you is from our recent presentation in September. A couple things have unfolded since then, but mostly this is on point. So as we approached the schedule for this, it was a 3-year tenure. So we broke it down into kind of 4 different silos of how we approached that schedule with the shell, the infrastructure, the interiors, and not only the interior office, which is non-historic, but also the interiors that are historic. So that's kind of how we like broke it down. And you may want to speak to how you guys are wanting to deliver certain things at certain times to help alleviate some of the displacement that's occurred.
Yeah, I think that one of the unique things about this process of how we responded to the proposal was, given how much information that we were able to receive, we were able to kind of think through this with a lot more confidence of how we could, from a scheduling standpoint, be able to deliver not only core and shell, but also some of the key tenants. And so I think that was part of the strategy, and I think we'll get into some of that later as we get further into the presentation. But that was really key, is again, having all this information let us have a lot more confidence in terms of how we could really drill down into a very specific solution.
Yeah, and that was one of the key indicators that we were told was part of our winning the process, was thinking about it in that way and thinking about how do we reduce time, which again reduces cost. We're always thinking with that mindset. So as it relates to the site, these are some updates. We are at 100% drawings right now. We are in the bidding process. It will bid next week. So we are about to roll into full construction, but to date, we were able to do a few early bid packages, such as all the demo is complete. I'll show you some photos of that. We did early electrical really early on, and then we did our core MEP procurement not too long ago, and then we also procured the windows, which was a whole undertaking, and we may or may not get into that, but that's kind of the status. We did get fire marshal approval. This goes through the state. So we're pretty much rolling into construction, and my portion of this is kind of coming to a conclusion. But this is sort of where it is now interior-wise. Kind of looks a little bit more like the model that he showed you now that we've been able to demo out. So we're in preparation mode and ready to roll.
So this is an update. We're from the Legislative Oversight Committee meeting that Heather mentioned, but what we've been able to do is kind of build on all the initial information, and which is pretty obviously very robust. But again, us being able to speak to some of the historic interiors and some of the requirements that were there from an ownership standpoint, really wanting to maintain an aesthetic that was in line with the original architecture. And so I think that having the model, and we could really start to dial into some of those key architectural components, especially this image here is the entry lobby, and again, this is a modern renovation, and so being able to figure out how to fold in security, and based on some of the key tenants, Corporation Commission, and the amount of people that will be coming in, and there's a series of courtrooms, and being able to preserve kind of the integrity of the key interior spaces. And then just being able to, again, add all these layers of new materials, new finishes that really embellish kind of this great shell and core of a building. So just more images. We can linger there if you want, but
I think this image is I think important because our first oversight committee meeting, again, they didn't have landscape as part of this. We've been able to alleviate the budget, which we may or may not get into significantly by really studying with the point cloud. How do we find efficiencies in the MEP? How do we find efficiencies with the insulation around the perimeter on an existing building? How do we preserve some of the existing infrastructure that's still in good condition? Those were some studies that we did. We were able to help with the waterproofing issue that was originally, slated to be very robust, we were able to minimize that and find other ways to accommodate it. So we're able to find ways to really think through the budget to make sure that, again, we're not just thinking about the interior, but we're also thinking about how it connects to the Capitol. So this is one of the ways, and it may seem minimal, but it really does find ways to connect and create that grand entrance. If you've ever been to the building, it's very confusing as to how you get into the building or where do you go. These sort of things, minor things, we're able to help improve upon that. So this is a little bit of an update of what you'll see in the next couple of years. And then this is Jeremy's brainchild.
So I think that again, using all the information that we received allowed us to think a little bit differently about what we thought the solutions would be. And again, we'll get into some of that, but we felt like we had a lot of confidence in the budget that was our target. And I think that we had this inclination that there may be some other opportunities for what the state calls betterments instead of ad alternates. And so in our RFP response, we included some of these things that Heather alluded to, like maybe there's some opportunities with some additional funds if we're able to harvest those to really kind of shore up how this building, this beautiful historic building, presents itself to Lincoln, and to create opportunities for a more intuitive public experience with the building. And because you enter, it's an 8-story building, and you enter effectively on the 3rd level, and depending on where you're coming from, we just felt like there's an opportunity to maybe make that a little bit more succinct and a little bit more intuitive. And again, there's also an opportunity of how the building steps back at the top to, man, wouldn't it be great to find a way to capitalize on that view? You step out from the 6th floor onto a roof terrace that gives you an unparalleled vantage point to look at the Capitol. So that was all of those things we thought may be possible based on budget allocations and some of the strategies that we had to really tap into MEP efficiencies that we thought we could peel some money back towards the end to explore some of these options.
Yeah, so again, I just think that having this point cloud was so advantageous that we were able to not spend all of our time just drilling down on like what is actually inside this building, but rather it was already exposed to us. So we were able to think holistically and have more of a vision of how this actually becomes the iconic building it was originally meant to be. So that's a little bit about where we are, where we came from, and where we're going.
Okay, thank you. So we have a few questions, and then after this, we'll take a few questions from you all. But we talked a lot about money, and of course, money is always going to be an issue on any project, and I think it's one of those things on historic projects that, oh my gosh, there's so many unknowns, but also even more for public health, right? Let's move forward. So I can see that. Realistic budgets also during the design phase are sometimes hard to come by, and specifically due to the number of unknowns. And when you see one, it's almost like you kind of found a unicorn. How did having this information up front, we've already kind of covered some of that, affect the budget and your expectations of the budget and how you all were able to think about the budget and maybe offer a better one?
Well, starting from our side of things, some of the initial dollars and budgets set forth within the bond appropriation preceded this level of investigation. So that was being built on conversations within the market, looking at what had been accomplished with the state capital restoration, and kind of reeling in what some of those expectations were. That's what informed the overall legislation and bond request. And so from there, as we went into the RFQ and RFP phase, started to do those investigations and studies, we're always along the way, kind of just confirming that those dollars were adequate before we released release it to the design build teams to constantly have that confidence in that the next step would continue to be a successful project. And so having this information allowed us to step forward in that confidence that yes, we still think we are tracking and are ready to engage the design build teams. That's cool.
Yeah, so from our perspective, Matthew did an exceptional job in quantifying the status of the building, not only having this, the point cloud and all of its photos and everything like that, but he also just literally did all of his due diligence and quantified every need that he could possibly find within the tenants, within the building. What does the state want? And so it was really fantastic starting point. However, when it comes to our hands, and we have and hold the risk, it's like trust but verify. So we look at that, we allocate funds to these things and what we think they will cost given what he is expecting and wanting from that. And then we drill down on things where we're like, ooh, do we need to just replace all the equipment, or can we just, maybe test all of it and see? Do we need to do a comprehensive waterproofing system, or do we need to find out first where's the leaking coming from? And doing all of our due diligence underground and that sort of thing. Studying when it rains. I mean, I cannot even begin to tell you how many months we spent on some of these items. How do we learn from, quite frankly, the disaster of the window replacement at the Capitol? And how do we find solutions that we know are going to be successful? How do we study this? How do we bring in our experts? And so what resulted in that was that we came up with some efficiencies and maybe some different approaches. And we came back to Matthew saying, hey, this is the due diligence that we've done, and this is how we think this is going to come out. And as a result of those findings, we were able to really reduce the amount of cost, which is kind of parlaying into our desire to really embellish the design. So for us, kind of going back to what I said earlier, I think having so much information up front allowed us to be able to drill down on some of these things where we weren't just busy going and quantifying what exists in the building. We were able to have this like amazing slate to work from. And with an existing building of that nature, you just don't ever have that. So that was really fantastic. But what really helped us with the budget was being able to drill down on these really specialty items or big ticket items and finding solutions that were more cost effective in the end. And right now we're tracking under budget.
Jerry mentioned a few things as well about how it affected your design intent, possibly.
Yeah, I think that just kind of building on what they already said, but from a design standpoint, and working with CBM, who Heather mentioned is our material science and facade restoration expert. They're also a structural engineer on this project. But being able to use the virtual tour to point to, because they are in Philadelphia, not here, we're not having to disturb tenants, and being able to really, trust, but verify a lot of these interior solutions that we had a hunch on or about, but also from the standpoint of backing up, just in terms of the way the building performs. We knew we needed to do some restoration on the facade. We knew we needed to replace the windows, but what's the best way to do that? What is using the model that we received? We could do some really early modeling of the thermal performance. What if we were to embellish that? How could that then, from an energy modeling standpoint, be able to really test it? What the state had already invested a lot of money into some of the infrastructure, the four-pipe system. Is there any of that we could keep online, which would then again give us money that we didn't have to spend on that we could maybe do some of these other things. So, and I think the fact that we come from, like, historically, we've done a lot of historic tax credit projects, a lot of historic renovation projects. We never have this much information. And I think that it was just a breath of fresh air to be able to have confidence in a lot of these hunches that we had that we could then really build on and communicate as we interviewed for the project. So, did I answer all the questions that you've yet to ask?
Appreciate that. Well, into it. While I have you on the microphone, you mentioned what ifs, and I think we would all agree here that every project is a special project because of sometimes the random wackiness that we tend to find within buildings, especially on historic projects and projects that we do a lot of renovations. And so for this particular project, and I'm curious what all three of you think about this. What were some of the gotchas or some of the weird things that maybe you were able to catch early that allowed you to respond in a much more positive way when you started to maybe some of the others that you mentioned about this kind of information? What are some of the weird little intricacies that you may have noticed?
I mean, there's a lot just in terms of the, identifying what, the key kind of interior spaces that we need to restore. So there's a lot of detail using the model plus being able to have access to the original drawings could help, right? And then also the fact that there's a lot of weird things that happen in the egress system, and the stairs were different widths. Do they meet minimum requirements? And so part of our strategy from the onset was, because we have had a lot of experience, working with the fire marshal to negotiate our way out of doing maybe the worst case scenario in terms of adding additional stairs, all these things. But since we were going to be bringing the whole building up to code in terms of fire suppression and being, having, all the dimensions for the weirdness of the, the vertical stairs that we relied on to get people out of the building in case of an event. And so I think that was identifying that there were some deficiencies there, which was also in the master report that he gave us with the RFP. But I think that was one of the things that we thought, maybe again, do we need to take up space with additional egress system stair, and that embodied cost? Maybe we can. Our plan was, here's an opportunity to where that could happen, but we really feel like there's an opportunity to not. And so I think that was, again, having those little anomalies to be able to plan for and have confidence in is unique.
You guys have anything else to say about that?
Yeah. So, and part of the effort of our staff before we transmitted the Revit model that we received from Greenlight 360 onto the state was, again, to use the phrase trust but verify. We were kind of looking through that Revit model against the historic documents. So it was a little bit of cleaning and scrubbing that we would do, just kind of making sure that the column, sizes and notations match the drawings. But it helped us as we're trying to figure out some of those spaces as we're looking through it, to really look back at historic drawings and find this, 6th elevator that served as a dumbwaiter from the lower basement up to the 6th floor that really wasn't accessible. And you just walked around the point cloud and just felt like this 8-foot by 8-foot column. No one really quite knew what it was. But then, yes, from our standpoint, we're, analyzing this building from a much more conservative view. And so we were showing, and we may really need this third big defense, this additional stair. And so we were able to draw that out and really call attention to it. Some of the needs within the RFP document for the design teams to then go through and vet and be able to respond to their project approach. And we gave them the opportunity to find more creative solutions within code and health safety code and provide other options.
I.e., ignore him.
I.e. what?
Ignore me. Cheating from time to time.
Yeah.
So we have a few more minutes here before we open up the questions to anybody else. Working back and forth with the client is key to any campaign And how did these tools affect how you communicated either with the client, with Matt, and at least basically right down the street? You have other consultants that are not in Oklahoma, and then you also have the state who maybe doesn't want to necessarily come and meet you guys. That's said incorrectly. But they've got
On demand.
they're not necessarily on demand.
Sure.
How did having these tools affect how you communicated your ideas or designs to the client, even up to this point?
I think in the beginning with the sort of programming phase, as we were offering RFP, we had in-person meetings with each of the leasing agencies and tenants in the building to try to confirm the space requirements that they had. And for those that don't live in the world of floor plans and dimensions, that sense of scale is often not really understood. And so to be able in those meetings to pull up the virtual point cloud model and the virtual tour, we could kind of peel back the building and say, all right, well, here's the conference room that we're in right now. You need it bigger or smaller than this. So as we were having those conversations in real time, as we were offering the program, being able to look at and pull all the way down to one of their offices and kind of see the comparison was extremely helpful in trying to work through some of those base requirements that we then were able to handle with the design.
How many, oh my gosh, that person's office is so good. Did you get while you were in the design process?
So I'm glad there were moments in which you couldn't actually read the papers on the desk, but it's got
I feel really lucky in this project because we had Matthew Radcliffe, who was the originator of said, access to these plans and these models, but also our representative from the state is an architect. So communication regarding this has been really, I feel pretty seamless. They already had a lot of working knowledge of it prior to us coming on board. And so the conversations that we have we're able to go in depth pretty easily. Where we also saw a lot of value was when we brought in our consultants. So MEP, obviously, huge amount of need for this information as they start to design the systems, but also with CDM on the East Coast. They specialize in historic, and they had planned on 2 full site visits for their team to just kind of verify some things. But based on the access to this, 1 visit was all they needed. They were able to do everything else virtually because of the access that they had to this. And we were able to use all of that information as a jumping off point to do a BIM model that Jeremy's office was able to kind of be the hub for. You may want to elaborate on that. Sure.
What they said. No, I think that, there's really not much left to say because I think that from our standpoint, the design, when we're communicating back to a client who already is well versed in the information, I think it's more about just kind of clarifying. I think most of the work was communicating to the user agents, not necessarily the owner of the building, so to speak. So I think going through that same process, this is what it will look like now based on all of the fact finding that Mass had done, in conjunction with these tenants, current and future tenants of the same building. So I think that's really where it became really nice to be able to. They already had that point of reference, and then we were able to kind of embellish and really show them what an updated version of having this information would give them, and being able to envision what they do day in and day out would look like in these spaces. So
I just have one more question, just to bring back money. Did you guys remember to say anything you wanted to say about the money side? I know that we talk about budgets. It's one thing for a student to meet a budget, but it's nothing very commonly for a student to exceed budgets. But on this project, I think you had said that we were close to prepaid budget?
I mean, I haven't told Matt everything yet because we're bidding next week, but we are significantly under budget right now based on our infrastructure bids that have gone out. We have our full bid next week, which will give us all the information that everybody probably wants to know. But the savings, Jeremy pointed out a huge one. We did not have to put an extra stair in. We were able to work with fire marshal and work with code to get that removed from our scope. We didn't have to replace the elevator. Again, due diligence on that. Waterproofing significantly reduced. Window systems and infrastructure worked together for a massive cost reduction. So overall, all of those big ticket items really have added to the gain we have to work on the other end. We are so motivated by these betterments that we are really drumming up, whether it's improving on the finishes or adding, special interest and things of that nature. Those are kind of the things that go a long way and help tell the story of its history that we'd like to include. And so we're working very diligently to make sure that this building is going to be long lasting and will serve its purpose for years to come, but also that it has a special attention to detail that we want it to have. So.
That's great. Well, we only have a few more minutes left, and I just want to open up to anybody here. Do you all have any questions for these folks here or for me on the project or any of the things you've already discussed? Yes, Kiki.
Got into finding what was actually behind the walls, behind each of the bones. Did you ever come back in and update the model?
So the question was, after everything was discovered over areas, did we come back and update anything that was in the model? So from my perspective, our job was done once we handed everything over back. From there, it was the architect's responsibility to perform any updates. If you guys do this, actually, a good question for me, because I want to know how bad our stuff was or how fantastic our stuff was.
Fantastic, for sure. Yeah, I mean, we continue to update, and freeze certain parts of the model so that we could add new layers of what we're coming back with. But I think some of the things we've discussed, as it relates to continuing to utilize some of this technology is, what does it look like to potentially get some of this infrastructure in that we could then map out and have for future reference when, 10 years from now and we have different tenants come in and being able to remember where all this stuff is that gets covered up. But we're obviously, we haven't made any of those decisions yet, but I think it's just interesting to, that we wouldn't necessarily think about had we not had access to everything that we did with this information, but then how can we not just, the BIM coordinate whenever we're drawing, but like when some of this stuff goes in, what does that look like to have like real time as built information that we can use later. Hopefully we get to, continue to help other tenants envision themselves in their generations to come, and this information will be critical. That was a plug for you.
Yeah, and we will have, it's sort of a layered, right now it's a layered working model that was built by him, but there have been some interesting, discrepancies between the existing, where some things never got built or some things got built differently. So the original...
A giant water tank up in the attic that we didn't really anticipate being there, but,
all of that has been folded in. So our deliverable back to the state is going to be extremely comprehensive, from original drawings to what we were handed when we started the project to what we will be completed.